Well, friends, Romans, and countrymen, it's here. Zack Snyder's Justice League, the be-all, end-all for superhero films. The greatest masterpiece to ever grace the genre. Not just a film, but a work of art. It's beautiful. It would be a great understatement to say people have been looking forward to this movie, and in a way, I was too. So much had been said about this movie that, despite my extremely stated opposition to Zack Snyder's take on the DC characters, I became curious about what this movie would do. So when this movie did come out, I checked my issues with Man of Steel and Dawn of Justice at the door, made myself some popcorn, poured myself a Jack Daniels, and did the whole 4 hours in one go. And I didn't hate it. I mean, I didn't particularly like it or anything either, but I found to my surprise that for the most part, I was much less irritated with this movie than I was with Dawn of Justice. And there were some moments that I really actually kind of liked. Oh. It's not been 24 hours since I've watched this movie at the time of writing this script, but I've already had the implication of hypocrisy leveled at me for this, so I'm going to put this on record. Yes, I have always had the belief that a director should see their cut of a film completed, their creative vision finished. It's one of the reasons I was curious about the Snyder Cut. It always sucks when people mess with a director's creative vision, and I truly believe that shouldn't happen, that directors should always have final cut rights. But that does not mean they are exempt from criticism. Just because you have your full creative vision mapped out doesn't necessarily mean it's good. I touched on this a little in my Dawn of Justice video too. I never took the theatrical cut of that movie into account because it wasn't Snyder's full intention. I watched the Ultimate Edition to take his vision at face value, and I didn't like it. It's exactly the same thing here. So no, it's not hypocritical of me to say I support director's final cut rights and then turn around and point everything out that I don't like about this movie. That's literally just how film criticism works, and by that logic, we wouldn't be allowed to criticize any movie ever. I will in this video make no comparisons between this film and the 2017 Joss Whedon cut for one simple reason. I have never seen that cut of this film, and I fully never intend to. I want to review Zack Snyder's Justice League completely in isolation of the 2017 cut, so as to judge it as its own entity rather than a fix of a different film. I feel like this way my judgment will be completely uncluttered. I am not comparing it to anything else, I am simply taking what I saw at face value and evaluating it based on that. So, with that criteria in mind, the runtime is unforgivable. Now, do not get me wrong, I like long films. Most of my favorite films tend to be over 2 hours and 40 minutes, and I'm a big fan of films like Barry Lyndon, which is in excess of 3 hours long. I can definitely sit for a long film, though I think I found my general limit to be about the runtime of the theatrical cut of The Return of the King. So while I was initially daunted by the 4-hour runtime of this movie, I eventually reasoned I could do it. After all, I got through the extended edition of The Fellowship of the Ring once. I could do this, right? This movie has absolutely no business being 4 hours long. The pacing of this movie is abysmal. While it does pick up a little in the second half, that means that the first 2 hours are almost unbearably slow and are filled with scenes that go on for far longer than is really necessary. There are also many scenes in this movie that we absolutely do not need, which really feel like they were thrown in to pad the runtime. Please explain to me the point of the scene where Alfred teaches Diana how to make tea the British way. Why does the recap of Dawn of Justice have to go on for 6 years? What does Barry Allen saving Iris West have to do with anything else? Cool though it is. The movie wants you to believe that it is fleshing everything out, but it's really more bloating it out. I am absolutely convinced you could remove an hour from this film and it would not only still make sense, it would actually flow pretty decently. It still wouldn't exactly be high art like it desperately thinks it is, but it would be a lot easier to sit through and would approach being an enjoyable superhero film. Ultimately, the 4-hour runtime feels a lot less like a necessity and more like an attempt to be a lot more epic than the Whedon cut. Look at us, we're twice the movie that last cut was. Literally. Everything wrong with Snyder's directing style is back in spades with this movie. In fact, I think this might be the most Snyder-like Snyder film I've ever seen.
And that's saying something.
I'm going to get the obvious out of the way right off the bat and mention the slow motion. Until someone proves otherwise, I am going to say that you could remove at least 45 minutes from this movie if you played all of the needless slow motion at normal speed. I know this might be a tired point right now, but my god, there is a lot of slow motion in this movie. There is barely an action scene. No, there isn't an action scene in this film without any slow motion. And the effect of this is these fights grind to a complete halt a lot of the time. The movie is convinced that the slow motion adds drama and effect to these fights, but all it did was having me reach for the remote to see how long I had left on the movie. It's just grating, and I fail to see how people have not learned how to make interesting superhero fight scenes without overusing slow motion. Like, for fuck's sake, guys. Now, there are instances when the slow motion works, but all of those revolve solely around Barry Allen. The visualization of Barry Allen's super speed is, for the most part, actually pretty effective, because the slow motion is used somewhat well for these moments. The movie then shits on these scenes by having them outstay their welcome, but at least the slow motion is used well here. Then, of course, there's everything else about how this film is visually directed. I've seen some reviews on the internet describing this movie as visually stunning, and I'm quite convinced we watch completely different movies because this one's kind of ugly. There are several contributing factors to this, most of which are the usual suspects of a Snyder film: color grading and CGI. Snyder's insistence on sucking the saturation out of his films continues to baffle me. I know I've said this in every single video on Snyder I've made, but it continues to be true. And I truly think that it's overall worse in this movie than it has ever been. So much of this movie is just gray on gray on gray, and the scenes that aren't have this sort of ugly orange hue to them. As I've said before, this is a movie series where our main characters wear colorful costumes and fight colorful monsters. Why in the world is it a good idea to desaturate these movies until you can't see these colors anymore? Shit just doesn't make sense to me. And then there's the CGI. Warner Brothers poured an extra $70 million into finishing the Snyder Cut, most of which allegedly went into finishing the visual effects. And if I were Warner Brothers, I'd be asking for my money back, because most of the CGI in this movie is bloody terrible. There's this sort of plastic artificiality to a lot of the visual effects in this movie, and it just makes the whole affair look even uglier. The scene where we flash back to the battle between Darkseid and the Old Gods is probably the worst offender. Everything about this scene just looks so completely fake and unreal, including Zeus for some fucking reason. Like, he looks like a completely CGI character, which, why? And on the topic of CGI characters, I am fully sick of CGI comic book movie villains. Steppenwolf and Darkseid look fake as shit in this movie, and I cannot help but feel this could have been avoided if they'd just not made them mocap creations and had actors in prosthetics and makeup and then used CGI to enhance that to make them look massive and larger than life. It cannot be that hard to do, can it? The other side effect of this over-reliance on CGI is most of the fights just collapse into visual noise. I said this on my Twitter while watching the movie, but I'm also fully sick of completely CGI'd superhero battles because they all look the same. Justice League might as well have been fighting Ultrons or Outriders, and I would not have noticed the difference. On top of that, these fight scenes are a total mess, and after a while my eyes would just glaze over watching them. Please, guys, a crumb of clever filmmaking. I'm begging you. The final point on the visual direction I want to make is the aspect ratio. This movie was filmed on super 35mm film using the full frame so it could be projected as an IMAX aspect ratio. Now, for the most part, I don't actually have a problem with this, even if I feel that superhero films are much better suited to a 1.85:1 aspect ratio or an anamorphic aspect ratio. But on the whole, the cinematography in itself wasn't terrible, and on rare occasion, kinda beautiful, before the color grading fucked it. Junkie XL returns to the score duties, and the score of this movie is kind of aggressively bland. For the life of me, when I think about the score, there are only three things that immediately pop into my mind, and two of those leitmotifs were already written by Hans Zimmer, so that doesn't really count. The only piece of music I actively remember from this movie is this new theme given to Wonder Woman, and I'm kinda confused, because every time Wonder Woman is on screen and does a superhero pose or thinks or breathes, there's this strange ancient lamentation chant playing. I'm not on the whole sure why this was done, as there was absolutely nothing wrong with Wonder Woman's theme from Dawn of Justice. But here we are. And by the way, her theme from the other movies does appear in this movie, which is pretty much the only part of the score that got me amped up, because goddamn, that electric cello slaps. The rest of the score was pretty unremarkable to me, and when I did notice it, it sounded to my ears like it desperately wanted to be the score to something like Gladiator, which, okay. Yeah, I don't have much to say about the score, it's honestly just kind of there. The characterization in this movie is violently inconsistent, not because people's motivations randomly switch or anything, but in terms of the fact that some characters actually have character, and some have absolutely none. I have been informed by the internet that this cut of the movie has more character development than the original cut, and if that be the case, then the characterization in the original must have been a fucking joke, because there are only a couple of the members of the League in this movie who are in any way developed. Bruce, Diana, and Arthur are almost aggressively plain in this movie. There are small flashes of character in their interactions with other people, but for the most part, they all they really do is stand around looking stoic, say things to each other about impending doom and history and the fact that Superman's dead, and not a whole lot else. I truly wish I had more to say about that character development, but I don't, because the characters don't really develop outside of Bruce suddenly discovering a sense of humor and maybe some hints to the upcoming events of the Aquaman movie for Arthur. I will admit I laughed at a couple of Bruce's lines though. The I'm rich gag was pretty hilarious. Going into this movie, I wasn't sure about Ezra Miller, but I think he does a great job bringing Barry to life, and he's got this lovable goofiness to him that really works. It's not often that I can describe a character in a Snyder film as being charming, but Barry is. Now as a character, Barry doesn't really grow or progress much, but he has a welcome presence nonetheless. If you compare his personality to that of his comics counterpart, you're probably going to be a bit disappointed. He reminds me a lot more of Wally West than he does Barry personally. But as a character, I didn't mind him. There's a levity to his presentation in this movie that I actually really appreciated. And while some of his jokes were scripted cringe, most of them did really feel like jokes a young adult would make and were actually pretty funny. Also, his attempt to cover for his costume by saying he did competitive ice skating was an actual laugh out loud moment. The delivery was pretty much perfect. Also, some good nods to the comics in his visiting his dad in prison and the fact that he gets a job in a crime lab. It's decent stuff. It's just a shame that's all his character is and he doesn't really have much in terms of growth. Victor Stone is, of all the heroes in this movie, the only one who actually really approached having a character arc. Yes, it was an extremely predictable character arc, but it was an arc. Good job, Zack. You did it. Ray Fisher makes a really good Victor Stone. I feel like in some ways he was a little hampered by the screenplay as he has some truly cringe lines when he's talking to his father Silas, but his performance always felt genuine to me and I was invested in what was happening to him as a character. He also felt the most heroic to me in that he was watching over the world helping people. There's a moment where he helps someone who can no longer pay her bills by hacking her bank and dumping a load of money into her account, and it's my mind the most heroic thing anybody does in this movie. No monsters, no trucks hurtling towards anyone, just helping somebody who is in need. I really appreciated it. However, that does snowball into my confusion as to Victor's abilities. Now, most of his abilities square up with what I've seen before, super strength, hacking abilities, that sort of thing. I like all of that, and in fact, I do like that the movie briefly touches on how dangerous Victor's hacky abilities can make him. What does puzzle me is the design of his mechanical body and his new ability to manifest whatever he wants out of it. First of all, the design of his mechanical parts is CGI ass. Second of all, these mechanical pieces now seem to have much more in common with Tony Stark's nanotech suit from Infinity War than they do with Victor Stone. There are moments where he just manifests bits of technology and at some point extra arms out of himself, and those moments left me scratching my head. It really feels like they just had Victor have abilities as the screenplay required, and that feels a little cheap. Also, in terms of character arc, I think I've mapped out Victor's arc after about 5 minutes of his screen time, and I was right. Loner person says he doesn't need anybody only to find new friends. Didn't see that one coming. The villains are fatally boring. Steppenwolf as villain is not interesting in the slightest. His whole thing here is, I'ma take over the world because I owe Darkseid big time. That's it. No discernible character whatsoever. This is intensely frustrating, as the film insists on cutting back to him a lot, but every time we do, it's either him sitting with his thumbs up his backside, or him being on the phone to Desaad saying for the nth time, tell Darkseid I totally got this, which we know he doesn't. Also, when he gets punked at the end, I really don't feel any excitement. It's just like, oh neat, you got him, wow. And as I mentioned earlier in the direction section, I hate his design. I really do. But what I didn't mention there is the decision to make his horns on his helmet part of his actual head. It looks fucking stupid. And then there's Darkseid, who hangs at the edge of most of the film as a sort of existential evil threat. Now this actually works fairly decently. I like the idea that one of Darkseid's qualities is the fear he instills, and you get a sense of that here. But it does fall apart when we see him in action, as he is another CGI monster who frowns a lot. When he's off screen and being alluded to, he's a lot more effective. Oh, and Desaad is here too, I guess. This movie isn't as logically nonsensical as past Snyder films have been, but there is a lot of movie to cover here. So for clarity, I will divide this section according to the chapter titles. By the way, I also consider the chapter titles themselves to be pretty pretentious. This is a superhero movie, Zack, not a Stanley Kubrick film. You can tell because Kubrick actually gets to the point faster than this movie does. This movie begins with the death of Superman from Dawn of Justice. This time it's in ultra slow motion, because we gotta play the hits, I guess. As Superman dies, his death cry unleashes these shockwaves which travel across the world. As they do, people relevant to the plot look up apprehensively because they heard Superman die. They psychically know he was dead. This movie never makes an attempt to adequately explain this, so it just comes off as a kind of daft. We also see that when the Amazons hear the scream, they're all standing in front of the first mother box, ready to fight it. Because, I mean, yeah, it makes sense given what we learn later that they have a guard on it, but there are a lot of Amazons here just ready to kick some ass. Now, yes, the movie later tells it that Superman's presence on Earth kept the mother boxes asleep, but how did they know that the mother box was about to wake up before the Superman death wave arrives? You'd like to know, but the movie's keeping that one to itself. Also, it is worth noting that the Amazons have changed armor style from the functional armor they had in Wonder Woman to this sort of Xena warrior princess fan service look. Real classy, Zack. Real classy. I mean, Hippolyta gets to keep her regular armor, but a lot of these extras don't. Then we get a nice pretty shot of an icy cliff, and Bruce Wayne looks down over this cliff at a little sea town. The movie then cuts to him arriving in the town, skipping over how he got his horse down that cliff because we all know it would be bullshit. Bruce walks into this little town and demands to see Aquaman, giving a tired and cliched speech about how the world is in trouble and how he needs warriors to fight with him. Arthur stands up, he and Bruce have a dick measuring contest, and then Arthur decides he's had enough and goes back into the ocean, declaring that he won't help Bruce. This scene on its own, conceptually, is fine, but there are some very weird choices in it, specifically at the end when Arthur disappears into the water and the whole village just starts fucking singing. Why are they doing that? Do they worship Arthur or something? And then the singing continues for way longer than it has any right to, leading to the first but definitely not the last time that I checked my watch. We are, by the way, 15 minutes into this movie, and nothing has really happened. We get a little montage to show how everyone's doing. The short answer is not well. Martha's been foreclosed on. And then we cut to a terrorist situation in Europe where these cookie cutters are gonna blow up the city because reasons. Really feels to me like Zack watched the beginning of Superman 2, saw the opening set piece in Paris and thought, now what if I make that violent and edgy? And violent and edgy it is, because Wonder Woman busts in and fucking murders these guys, but not before the movie gives us a Wonder Woman upskirt shot. Real classy, man. So Wonder Woman fucking murders these guys and then throws the bomb that we're gonna use to kill everyone out into the sky. This head terrorist decides he's gonna respond by shooting children, because if you want to make a villain hateable quickly, you just have to have them point a gun at a child. And Wonder Woman jumps to the rescue and deflects the bullet in an admittedly pretty cool shot. She then bangs her gauntlets together and kills the head terrorist in an explosion. Wonder Woman checks on the kids in a moment that would be kinda sweet if it weren't for the blunt ass dialogue. We now return to the Amazons, who are now far more understandably on edge now that the mother box is actually awake. A boom tube appears and Steppenwolf appears. He was Steppenwolf and not a handsome man. Followed by his army of disposable CG monsters. Yes, I know parademons are a thing in the comics, but I think my point still stands. A dumb CGI battle begins, and Hippolyta attempts to take the mother box into hiding, which seems pretty fruitless to me now that it's awake. I guess if it wakes, Steppenwolf can just track it like he just did. So it seems to me that they're fucked no matter how you slice it. Predictably, Steppenwolf gets his hands on the box, then beats a hasty retreat once the full force of the Amazon army arrives late. So now Steppenwolf has one of the boxes. Great! We are already 35 minutes into this movie. Are you seeing my irritation with this pacing yet? Steppenwolf sets up shop and discounts Chernobyl, I guess. Then we get a scene between Bruce and Alfred that was apparently so insignificant that my only note for it is a joke about how Alfred is once again the only sane person in this movie. So it strikes me that's probably a couple of minutes we could have shaved off this movie. We get a little bit of a parademon rummaging through Star Labs in search of one of the two remaining mother boxes because it somehow knows to look there but can't track it to Victor's home. Dr. Silas Stone finds out that the lab had been broken into and he goes to see Victor to tell him the box isn't safe. It's here that we learn that Victor hates his father for saving his life as he hates his cybernetic implants. And in terms of character development, I like this. It works, even if the dialogue attached to it is a little silly. Also, the sheer concept that anyone thought that the mother box would be safe hanging out in Victor's cupboard is a little ridiculous, but I guess we have to get Victor into the main action somehow, I suppose. The Amazons fire a magic arrow at Europe to send a message to Diana telling her that trouble is afoot, and she descends into the underground palace of plot exposition to learn about the mother boxes and Darkseid. We then cut to a tugboat capsizing in an open ocean because apparently tugboats go out that far, and Aquaman comes to rescue him, drops him off on land and takes a bottle of whiskey which he promptly downs and then throws into the ocean in what I was assuming was supposed to be a cool shot, but is actually kind of annoying. Like Arthur Curry, the guy whose whole thing is take care of the ocean, willingly litters into it. So Arthur goes down into the ocean and Willem Dafoe shows up for a bit of cheeky exposition, which I'm not convinced was absolutely necessary, and it feels a lot more like it's here because Willem Dafoe. By the way, everything I just described to you from the beginning of part 2 up until this point took 22 minutes. We are now an hour into this film. None of our heroes have so much as seen a parademon. Diana goes to visit Bruce and we get another exposition dump, this time in the form of Diana explaining the history of Darkseid's first attempted invasion of Earth. There are a couple of neat details here, such as the Green Lantern present in the scene looking a lot like Kilowog. For the most part, it's a mix of very wordy exposition and crappy CGI, which doesn't exactly make for gripping movie making. We also learn exactly what the mother boxes are here, so that's nice, I guess. We are now well over an hour into the movie, so obviously now is the time to introduce Barry Allen, who is awkwardly trying to apply for a job with a dog walking company. As he does so, one of the dumbest car accidents of all time is about to occur. Fucking hamburger on the floor, really? And the victim is about to be Iris West, I guess. Barry sees the accident beginning to unfold and he runs to Iris's rescue. Now this scene is one of the biggest mixed bags in this movie for me. For starts, it's gorgeously shot. Like, really. This shot of Barry running through the glass is pretty fantastic, and it's all, dare I say it, kind of exciting. But then the scene carries on for far longer than it really has to, once again killing the pacing of the scene and the movie. Also, the soundtrack's kind of dog shit. We get more runtime padding in the form of Lois Lane, and then we return to Victor, where we learn in flashback the nature of how he became Cyborg. And for the most part, it is interesting. We get to see Victor playing football, albeit in excruciating slow motion, and we get to see that he's a kind and caring guy, helping out a fellow student in need. We then see the car crash, which kills his mother and nearly kills him, and we know what happens from there. After this flashback, Victor listens to his father on tape, at which point he learns all of his cybernetic abilities through the power of narration, which has to be the most irritating trope in a superhero film ever. It was annoying in the 1978 Superman film, and it's annoying here. But it does lead to that moment I mentioned earlier where he helps that woman out with her money problems over the internet, so it has that going for it. It's also at this point, when I was live streaming myself watching this movie, that somebody described Victor Stone as anonymous as a superhero, and while not completely accurate, I thought it was pretty funny. So I feel like I should mention it. Barry visits his father in prison, which serves as a neat little cross-section of Barry's character, but I'm not completely convinced needed to be in the movie. Probably is information better suited to a solo film, in my opinion. Then he goes home where he meets Bruce. We are, by the way, 90 minutes into this shit. Bruce asks Barry to join him, and he immediately agrees. We also get a very brief explanation of the Speed Force, which helps set up how Barry's powers work later in the movie. We now cut to Diana trying to make tea, but Alfred keeps butting in, which seems like this movie's idea of a joke, and then she's summoned to a random city block by Victor. However, when she gets there and says the world needs his help, he immediately turns around and says he doesn't need anyone else and doesn't want to help the world. And I was going to get annoyed at this 180 from reaching out and then shutting down Diana all in one go, but then the movie said it was a sign that Victor was trying to reach out and then he needed to get out of his shell. And I thought that might be a slightly clunky way of achieving this point, but oh well. He then leaves to go bury the mother box next to his mother, because wholly overdone symbolism, Batman. And then we cut to some quick setup of how Silas Stone will tag the mother box so the Justice League can track it by superheating it. See? It all connects. And because this movie's forgotten about him for a while, we check in on Arthur Curry and Atlantis, where we see Steppenwolf take the mother box that was hidden in Atlantis and generally kick some fish people ass. I feel like I should point out that there is a 70-minute gap between Steppenwolf getting his first and second mother box. That is entirely too much time. This part begins with Commissioner Gordon talking to the Justice League on the roof of the Gotham Police Department because of a subplot about the Parademon sketch looking like Batman that I'd completely forgotten about up until this point, and we learn that the Parademons are hanging out in these tunnels that go to Stryker's Island. The Justice League proceeds to the tunnels to find Steppenwolf, and thus begins yet another dumb and borderline incomprehensible CGI fight that goes on for, wait, let me check, a full 10 minutes. That's longer than the fight that the movie Batman vs. Superman is named after. During this fight, we get some neat moments, like Victor whipping out his famous sonic cannon and Barry throwing Diana's sword to her. But there are also some silly moments, like Barry tripping over his own goddamn feet. This battle ultimately goes nowhere except to save some scientists from Star Labs who are almost completely irrelevant. You'd think Steppenwolf would have killed them by now anyway. And really, this only serves in the long run to get Aquaman into the same place as the rest of the League when he saves them all from dying in a flood. After all this, Steppenwolf has somehow determined that the anti-life equation, the key to universal domination, is on Earth, and he calls Desaad to tell him so. Darkseid then gets on the phone and says he'll be around to check on that, and that Steppenwolf better not fuck up till he gets there. And I feel like anybody who's ever seen a movie ever knows at this point, if they didn't already, that Steppenwolf is now dead as disco. He was a Steppenwolf, not very bright at all. Victor brings the last mother box to the Justice League and explains how it works, telling the League about how he was made using the mother box. I can't help but wonder at the logic of this. We know because they basically spelled out that Superman's mere presence on Earth kept the mother boxes dormant, which is extremely stupid, but we needed more Superman Jesus imagery apparently. And yet they managed to use one to build Victor. So they can use the mother box when it's dormant? Did it wake up, but that doesn't count because Superman is alive? The logic of how the mother boxes work and when they communicate with Darkseid's lot is kinda murky. So now the League have heard Victor's exposition, and together they hatch the brilliant plan to bring Superman back to life with it. And when I say brilliant, I mean it's a fucking terrible plan, but they've already dug the grave with him dying at the end of Dawn of Justice, so we're pretty much stuck with it. The movie briefly remembers that Lois and Martha exist, and the two of them have a nice conversation before it's revealed that Martha was actually the Martian Manhunter, which, why? Why? What does that achieve? Also, while I'm on this subject, I already dislike this version of Martian Manhunter. This movie tells us he's been on Earth this whole time as the general who was an asshole in Man of Steel and Dawn of Justice. So you're telling me this man, the man who delivers this piece of shit in Man of Steel—
I'm just speculating, but I think whoever's at the helm of that thing is looking to make a dramatic entrance.
—and says this shit in Dawn of Justice—
you know, with balls like yours, you belong in here.
That's Martian Manhunter? The worst bit is there's a member of this cast in this very movie who would have played an infinitely better Martian Manhunter, but instead he's playing Silas Stone. Part 5 begins with a bit of cheeky grave robbing, during which Barry expresses his wish to try and smash with Diana, which, mood, but we really didn't need it in the movie, did we? Alfred begs Bruce not to go through with it, because he's once again the only sane person in the film, but Bruce doesn't listen, instead orchestrating a break into Star Labs to get Clark's body into the amniotic fluid so they can use that and the mother box to bring Clark back to life. They manage to get into the building through a mix of sending Barry in first with Clark's body and a fake biohazard alarm, during which we get a father-son reconciliation between Victor and Silas, which pretty much sealed Silas's fate as a dead man, and quickly all the pieces are in place for Clark to be brought back to life. Barry runs at the mother box and supercharges it, because the new 52 has decided that Speed Force users have electricity powers, I guess, and Victor hacks into the Kryptonian computer. How? I'm guessing it's because of the mother box being how he has his cybernetic implants, but it also struck me as just a little bit silly. This scene also establishes that the Speed Force also makes time go wibbly when Barry hits a certain speed.
That's a surprise tool that can help us later.
Oh yeah, and Lois randomly wakes up and wanders towards the Star Labs area because the script told her to, continuing the Snyder tradition of Lois being a plot convenience, not a character. I cannot stress enough how much I hate this shit. The plan works and Clark comes back to life, but, shocker of all fucking shockers, he has amnesia. And then, because of some scripted ass bullshit, Victor accidentally shoots Clark, so now he's superpowered, has amnesia, and is angry. Yet Bruce, remember when Alfred told you this was a bad plan? So the Justice League has to fight Clark, which is of course yet another dumb CGI fight filled with too much slow motion. There is one cool moment when Clark watches Barry as he runs at super speed, but that's really about it for a cool factor in the scene. The rest is visual noise to me. Oh, and during the fight, nobody thinks to keep an eye on Silas in the mother box, so it's no surprise when Steppenwolf steals it from under their noses. Clark and the League punch each other for a bit, but then it's all rendered moot when Lois comes out of nowhere and cries for Clark, and then Clark sees her, and the power of love stops his anger and helps him to begin remembering everything. Fuck you. I cannot tell you how much that annoys me. All this is in the movie for is to delay Superman's arrival to the final battle to the last minute so we can have a bit of cheap tension, because otherwise it's just complete storytelling nonsense. So now the League remembers about the mother box and they get back to the lab just in time to see Silas sacrifice himself to tag the box with extreme heat so the Justice can track it to Steppenwolf's base. However, they don't realize this just yet because we need a couple of minutes where the heroes believe they've lost everything so they can have a wait a minute, there's still a chance moment, which in action films is probably the most predictable trope of all time. But they have that moment and they realize they can take the fight to Steppenwolf and defeat him once and for all. Why did I slip into an American accent? The fuck was that about? The beginning of part 6 is basically fluff with Clark trying to completely remember who he is, but remembering that he loves Lois very much. Mercifully, it doesn't take him long to remember who he is, but he's not flying to the League yet because that has to happen at the last minute. We see the League formulate their plan, and honestly, I like the way it's set up here. The finale is written so that Cyborg and the Flash actually each have a specific purpose. Barry has to supercharge Victor and push him into the unity between the mother boxes, and Victor will stop the boxes from synchronizing, therefore stopping the end of the world. I like that they have an active purpose. As for what Aquaman's doing here, your guess is as good as mine. Clark goes back to the Kryptonian ship and gets all spiffy in his new black suit. Why is he wearing the black suit? Because. And he flies around the world going to find Alfred to find out where the others are going. Because he can't just find out himself? The Justice League arrives at Discount Chernobyl and the film then falls into complete visual noise. Like, I wish I had more to say about what happens here, but I don't. It's all just become noise to me. And it carries on for quite some time until there's a moment where Steppenwolf raises his axe to kill Cyborg, and then an only then does Superman arrive, joining the battle against the forces of evil. But no sooner does he do that does Darkseid open a boom tube to Earth and the mother boxes synchronize and the world is destroyed. But it's not over, because now Barry is running so fast that time around him begins to run backwards because of the Speed Force. And straight up, this movement is also pretty exciting. I mean, we all know how it's gonna end, but the visuals in this moment are actually pretty stunning, and it stands out as a really top-class superhero moment in a fight that's otherwise been noise to me. If this movie had more of this kind of inventive visuals, I'd probably like it a lot more. Although, it does strike me that this does feel like it was inspired somewhat by the 78 Superman movie, where he turns back time and saves the world, but I actually kind of prefer it here because it gives Barry a purpose. Time reverses to before the boxes synchronize, and Barry pushes Victor into the Unity, where he stops the synchronization of the boxes and with Clark's help pulls them apart, destroying the Unity and saving the world. Diana then decapitates Steppenwolf and sends his head and body back through the boom tube to Darkseid, where he stands watching angrily as Desaad and Granny Goodness just hang out in the background. The boom tube closes. Earth is safe, but not for long, as Darkseid tells Desaad to prepare the army for invasion. Most of this section is just little scenes, but some of them are quite nice. Victor listens to a tape his dad left for him, inspiring him to further work with the League to save the world. Arthur tells Willem Dafoe that he's going to spend some time with his dad. Aquaman foreshadowing. Barry gets a job at a crime lab, and Bruce and Diana start working on a watchtower at Wayne Manor, while Bruce buys the bank that had foreclosed on Martha so she can have the farm back. I'd completely forgotten about the business with the farm, by the way. It's all pretty nice stuff. Then comes the sequel setup for sequels that will probably never happen. Luthor has escaped from prison and he's meeting with Deathstroke to organize Batman's death. This in of itself isn't terrible, and I actually really like the Deathstroke design in this movie. And then Bruce has another nightmare dream, except in this one, he, Victor, Barry, Deathstroke, and Amber Heard and the fucking Joker are fighting together to bring the world back to what it was before Darkseid. And again, this is no longer going to go anywhere, so I can't help but feel this should have been left on the cutting room floor, or released as a bonus scene with the inevitable Blu-ray release. But here we are. Bruce wakes up from this dream to meet the Martian Manhunter, who tells Bruce that Darkseid will be back, name drops himself, and then flies away. And then, at long fucking last, the movie is over. It's nice to see Diana doing some shit at the museum. Steppenwolf owes Darkseid 50,000 worlds? That's excessive. How badly did he fuck up? The human soldiers in this flashback kind of look like Lord of the Rings characters. I love how Victor's mother says, "I can't wait to see what you'll be tomorrow," and then immediately fucking dies. Why is Barry the one to lampshade the hero's disappearing thing? Seems to me he'd be the best at it. Oh, that's probably the joke. Since when can Cyborg just magic technology back together? The reference to Ryan Choi, the Atom, it's pretty neat. I like that. Why is the foots in the door so funny to Barry's dad?
I bought the bank.
It seemed neater.
Killing Joke reference. Batman said he's dead inside. Lol. Batman says he's going to kill the Joker. It's implied that he might be bullshitting, but the fact that he says it is just kind of irritating. Also, like the 4 Autumn thing at the end, that's so sad. Now I'm sad. Ultimately, Zack Snyder's Justice League isn't the absolute shit-ass dumpster fire I was expecting that it was going to be. That's not to say that I particularly like it overall or anything, but it did quite exceed my expectations, I can safely say that. However, I still have some major issues with it. The pacing is abysmal, and it is plainly clear to me that this movie should not be 4 hours long. It's also fairly safe to say that had this movie actually come out in 2017 with Snyder at the helm instead of Whedon, it wouldn't have looked like this completely. It definitely would not have been 4 hours long. I'd say probably 3 at the max, which would have been a far more enjoyable film. This isn't a true vision of what the film would have looked like if Snyder had originally seen it through, but a more self-indulgent inflation of what it would have been, fueled by the fans who have called for its release for so long. And supposing that it would have been this way, supposing that it was originally intended to be the full 4 hours, it's still a major slog to get through. I can safely say that, save for the inevitable rechecking as I edit this video, I'll probably never watch this movie again, though if a slightly shorter edit was ever made, I might give that a go. But at least it's out, and at least there'll be no more public outcry calling for a drastic recut of the movie. Oh, fuck!